Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tradie Business School podcast, the only podcast you're ever going to need to grow and scale your trade-based business, but any business for that matter. A lot of what we teach is applicable across the board. Today, we are celebrating International Women's Day, but we're going to go one better, and we're going to turn this into International Women's Month. So tune in today and for the next 4 weeks where I interview some amazing women who have been hugely influential on my life. And do superhuman things on a daily basis and think nothing of it. So I hope you enjoy the show. Please welcome my first guest, Yuan Liu. Yuan, thanks for joining me today. It's amazing to have you back on the show. It's really about you and celebrating you. So how's things going? You're like getting into the late stages of your second pregnancy now.
That's right. I'm 34 weeks, exactly 34 weeks, and so we're coming to the crunchy end of the deal.
Yeah.
We're literally going, oh my goodness, we're going to start setting up baby stuff. We've completely left it to the last minute this time. But obviously things are different. Running 2 businesses, already have a 3-year-old toddler. So things are a little bit more manic this time around.
Yeah. And I think that this is going to be a really good episode for women out there who are juggling all this stuff and just talking about, I guess, the trials and tribulations of I guess, growing a business, evolving that business, managing being a mum, managing being a wife, all of those sorts of things. And this is really also for the men to listen up and stop being whiny babies about all the things that you think you've got going on, because the women I've got on today, they're in no way short of being, Wonder Women in what they do. So, Yuan, I really want to just, I guess, go back to, I guess, the start of, let's say, your career when things were pretty cool and you had all the time in the world to kind of do things. Before you decided to start, building multi, 6-figure businesses and, growing babies inside you and doing all the things. Take me back to the start. How did it all come about?
I was reflecting on this myself the other day to, once upon a time when there was all the time in the world. So I knew from the beginning as a dietitian, I didn't want to work in the hospital. So it was always going to be private practice. But the way they painted private practice in our industry is you set up a clinic somewhere, whether it's in a doctor's office or physiotherapist studio, and you just see patients that's referred to you. So essentially, private practice was just basically contract-based, one-on-one clinical work.
Yeah.
And that didn't really sit well with me. I was traveling from clinic to clinic, and it just didn't feel cohesive, and it didn't feel like I could really put my point forward, be able to share my values in what I did and be able to create this cohesive space. So we ended up having our own clinic. So in private practice in the health space, that is like the pinnacle when you've got your own, building, you've got your own offices, you've got your own staff. And so we had that. And that was, how long ago was that now? 2016 was when the business existed as that. So we had it
as a clinical practice.
Yeah.
Before that, though, did you have a quintessential job, or did you come out of uni and basically go straight into
I just went straight into private practice. I had like the tiniest stint in a hospital. It was like a 3 to 6 month stint in a hospital. And from there, just realized it was not for me. I didn't like the fact that they were just saying, oh, yeah, here, someone's just had a stroke. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this piece of education material that's dated 10 years back and you're going to just run them through outdated information. That to me just never sat well. So I didn't last very long in a job. So it was always going to be. I was very, very unemployable. In that respect.
It's really funny. Like I see this, like not just in men and like so I see it in both men and women. Sorry, is that, and we've talked about how unemployable I am these days, and it's that common trait that shows up in business owners and high performers is that they just constantly push that envelope, and even
design.
What was that? Sorry,
they've got their own design of how they see things done.
Yeah. So I think that's a tip for anybody out there. Like if you're thinking about starting your own business, like it's probably the best way for you to go because you're probably going to start butting heads with your boss sooner or later.
That's exactly right. And so when we eventually got our own space, it was a really sort of scary moment because there was a lot to invest in, obviously, getting the premise, setting the premise up. And there was absolutely no guarantees that once we had everything going that we were ever going to get clients through the door. So it was, I guess, test number one as a business owner was that transition from clinician to business owner. And I didn't do that part of it particularly well. I didn't have a lot of help in the form of coaching or mentoring. It was just taking random stabs in the dark, emulating what people around me were doing and hoping something would stick. And that didn't work right because I think it was a couple of years up until that point, we'd finally gotten the business to a point where it was overall turning over about $10,000 a month maximum. That was the highest month we'd made. Wow. And that was nothing when you think about them paying the rental of the actual premise, the staff, we had contractors. And so I'd hit a bit of a crisis point, if you will, where I had time, but I had no knowledge, no skill as far as business growth goes. And as a result of that, had no money. So that was when I bit the bullet and invested in mentorship. And I think this is the thing, is if you're looking for mentorship and you're looking to get someone in to help you, you've got to be honest with yourself, right? And I was super honest with myself that I was never going to figure it out on my own in good time. I didn't want to waste the next 5 years.
I've got a question for you though. At that point in time, could you afford the mentoring?
I knew the question. The answer was no.
Because this is the thing, right? Like I have this conversation with people all the time, and I know you do too, right? It's the whole, I don't have the money, right? I can't afford it. But the thing is, and what I want to challenge people listening to is you probably can't afford not to either. And I think that was very true for yourself. I know it was for me, is that you can't afford to keep beating your head against the wall and trying to solve the problems by headbutting bricks.
That's exactly right. And when you genuinely don't know what the next step is, you can keep, like what I was doing, throwing mud at the wall and hoping something sticks, or you could actually shine a light on it with the right guidance, right? So there was no way. I was not affording it. In fact, I had to ask for a broken down payment plan just so I could get into the program. But one thing that I knew I was able to do was I had the ability to follow due process. So whatever was laid out in front of me, I did the work and I did it really, really fast. And I started getting results really, really fast because obviously when you invest in mentorship, you get that guidance. Yeah,
you set some kind of record for consuming all the content in like a week or something.
In the first week.
Yeah.
I know. They released the content to me. I was bugging them to release the content to me over the weekend and they're like, calm down. You'll get your login details Monday morning. And I did. And as soon as I got my login details, pretty much it was clinic all day, come home at night, get some dinner into me, and then it was straight into the content. And it wasn't just about consuming content. It was then pausing the videos to set up my ads, pausing the videos to set up all the things that needed to be set up. And it worked really, really well. And I think, within 6 months, we had taken the business to that sub 100K mark to over $500,000 in turnover.
Wow.
And in that time, other things that really changed as well was our mindset around what we actually needed to have a successful healthcare business. And so it was over that period of time that we actually ended up saying goodbye to all of our contractors. We ended our lease with our premise after that year's lease was up, and we transformed it. Well, we transported everything online.
So hang on, you built your business to $500,000, then you sacked everyone and moved out of your premise.
Correct.
Excellent. I mean, that seems like logical business to me.
I mean, we started to realize we actually had no need for the amount of staff or the premise itself because everything was happening online or over the phone. And when we were with our clients, we were in Port Douglas in a retreat, or we were in an event space, So it just made no sense to hold on to an old model that wasn't serving us anymore. So I think that was the second really, really tough part of this business journey, was being able to be open-minded enough to shift the way we had done things to embrace new ways of doing things. And that to me was a huge leap of faith, because in our industry, having your physical premise, having your team of staff, like I said, was considered the pinnacle of success. So it really challenged my understanding and my ideals of what success looked like. Yeah. So that was a big turning point. And at this point, I was really lucky in that I had my husband in the business. He was primarily on the phones doing sales. I could focus on content creation and delivery, but he hated what he was doing.
And this, I think this is really important, right, for all those couples that are listening, right? Because I know I went through it, and I know you're about to talk about this, but this kind of, we see this all the time, both with the business owners that you and I help now, is these partners, husbands, significant others, whatever it may be, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, whatever it may be, these multiple people in business together by default, not because they want to be there, because they think it makes sense, but very rarely does it ever make sense, and very rarely does it end up in a really fruitful business. So go on, please continue.
Well, exactly.
So you were lucky. You had your husband. Lucky.
I was lucky because, in many ways, this was kind of my own journey as well, through coming out of my shell into becoming a leader in my space and in my business. There was always a little bit of fear there. And so having him there in the business, it kind of eased that fear, because there was two of us. We were both in it together. And this brings us to roughly 2018, when I fell pregnant with my daughter.
Yeah.
And, at that time when I fell pregnant with my daughter, I was really, really counting my lucky stars, because I had a horrendous first trimester with morning sickness. So it was great having my husband in the business. But the one thing I noticed in that space was I was not feeling relaxed, because every day I would check in with him and micromanage him, saying, how many sales calls have you made? How many dials have you done? How many calls ended up in a sale or not? And he felt really under the pump, because I was, managing him. And in a relationship, when you're husband and wife, nobody likes to be managed by their significant other. But in a business setting, that was kind of my job, was to do those check-ins and make sure he's hitting his KPI, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's the challenging thing, right, is you've got to have those clear boundaries.
That's exactly.
And you need to have those roles and responsibilities too. But the challenge is it becomes such a grey area of, where do we draw the line here? Where is it relationship? Where is it work?
Exactly. And it got to a point where, he'd come to me and say, that sale didn't close, into a yes, because, they gave me these objections and this is how I handled it. And I would give him advice on how to handle the objections that I wasn't at the time handling myself, and that would tick him over the edge. Because he's like, you're not even doing it, And I went, you know what, he's got a fair point, but also, how do I manage this situation? And it wasn't until I was about 5 months pregnant with my daughter that I had a bit of an epiphany. And the epiphany was that I needed to take control of the wheel. And for as long as I left that control to my husband, I was always going to feel out of control, number one. But two, I was always going to be in a position where I had to manage him, because how else am I going to ensure that the job is done? And he was miserable, and he only did the work because he wanted to make me happy, and he didn't want to, feel like he was letting me down. So it was a bit of a relief moment for him, if you will, when I came home and I essentially fired him from his role.
What? You fired your husband?
I fired my husband.
Are you still married?
And more happily than before, because what I didn't realize was I was having all of these stories and these, I guess, worries that he was going to take the sacking a really bad way. But in his eyes, it was the blessing that he was counting on, because he couldn't actually say, I'm done in that role.
Because he didn't want to let you down, and that's
Correct.
the stories that we talk about all the time. He had a story he didn't want to let you down. You had a story that you didn't want to fire him because he was going to hate you or whatever it may be.
That's exactly right. And in the end, I remember that entire drive home, I was practicing my
Firing speech.
And, sat him down, had the conversation, asked him what he really wanted and asked him how he would feel if I was to exit him out of the business. I used all of the most, benign language.
How can I avoid saying the thing that I really need to say?
That's exactly right. And I said, how would you like to, exit the business, take a few months to yourself and then be full-time dad for a while until you figure out what your next step is? And he took to that so well, like a moth to light, right? He just loved the concept of not having to deal with sales again.
Yeah.
So I was literally 5 months pregnant when I had reduced and dwindled down my staffing down to myself.
Yeah, so, nice.
Yeah, it was a really scary moment because all of a sudden I had to pick up the pieces with marketing, with sales, with content creation, delivery, all of those steps that we talk about that make up, the process of the business.
Yeah.
I was doing it. And, it was exciting at first because I could then see how all those bits and pieces would lock in together. But it was also extremely scary because now there was no fallback guy. There was no one I could fall back on and lean on.
It's that extreme ownership, isn't it? Like it's empowering because you're not abdicating your responsibility to other people, but it's also frightening because it's frightening. Like, I have to do this now.
And therefore, whether the business succeeds or whether the business fails, there is no ability at that point to blame it on anybody else. It was just all on me. For me, I have a very strange tenacity, if you will, to make things work. So between then and when my daughter came along, we actually had some of our highest sales months and we ended up putting on quite a lot of new clients and also putting away quite a lot of cash so I could actually have a little bit of a break when I had the baby. And so, it was one of those moments where the trust and the faith in self started to really develop. And we haven't really looked back since. So my husband's been stay-at-home dad for the last 3 years, and now he's about to prolong that tenureship as we're having another one. But for me, it's the juggle, right? And
I think that's one thing I love about your story and your relationship in particular. Like, is it smashes so many quintessential stereotypes of the man has to go to work and be the breadwinner, whereas you've built this really successful business. You've basically done your days by design or doing your days by design now, and your husband's like the stat. And the misogyny comes out, right? The Mr. Mum, right? Because we've got that programming that it's the mum's job, but like he's a stay-at-home dad and he's bloody good at it. It's like I love seeing the little snippets every now and again of Charlie running amok and him as well.
That's
and it's cool, yeah. So you're and this is the thing we see with like high achievers all the time, right? This crazy shit that they do, like start a business, build it to $500,000, fire everyone, move out of the premise, come home, get pregnant again. Well, you were pregnant again when all that was happening, weren't you? Yeah. And then fire your husband and then take everything on in the middle of the pregnancy.
Exactly.
Fast forward to now, like you've built the business up again. You've opened up like a secondary arm or basically a second business.
Got a second business. So, the second business was kind of like an organic flow on where I teaching healthcare business owners how to do their businesses, right? Outside of that traditional model, which for them is bringing in no money. It's sapping all their time, all of their energy, and it's essentially driving them nuts because they're seeing people they don't want to see. So, starting that business, I think we started it in October last year. No, not last year, sorry, the year before, 2021, October 2021. And within 12 months was able to build it to multi-six figures. So it was a very, very successful first 12 months in the business. But what that also meant was a shit ton more work. So it was sort of this business that I've got over here, my core business. And then it was about also stepping into a new mind frame of, niche work and marketing and sales.
And then just for a curveball, you thought, oh, it's time to be a mum again.
Well, exactly right. I thought, you know what? I don't want the gap to be too big between my children. So it's either now or I'll just keep putting it off forever. I just didn't expect it to happen as quickly as it had happened. But
didn't expect it to happen, but you're partaking in baby making activities, young lady.
I was giving myself about 6 months, and this comes down to my own health, right? Because underlying all of this, I do have polycystic ovarian syndrome and endometriosis. So fertility was always a bit of a touchy subject, where doctors were convinced I couldn't fall pregnant naturally, which we debunked when we fell pregnant with Charlie. But I was giving myself about 6 months of trying before I actually would succeed. It happened month number 1, and that's what I didn't expect it to happen.
High achiever. I'm 1 from 1, 100% strike rate.
100% strike rate. So we didn't expect it to happen so sort of quickly. Yeah. And so it just kind of fast-tracked everything. And just like, previously, trimester 1 was horrendous. And I also got, I think a sinus infection. It wasn't fun, but it was that sort of going, all right, well, I've got 2 businesses. I've got 2 sets of clients I've got to serve. And I've got to grow, and I've got to grow a baby, and I've got a toddler, and that kind of juggling act. So, the tough part was this time around, you couldn't just sleep whenever you wanted to sleep and sleep till whenever you wanted to sleep till. There was a 3-year-old chomping at your bits at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So every day without fail, that was something that was going to happen. And then you layer on top of that, running a couple of businesses, one of which was pretty new and still in that growth phase. It meant a lot of compromises. It meant, sitting up in bed for an hour and a half to do a sales call and then straight away lying back down to have a nap. It meant muting people on the call to go and throw up and then coming back and then getting back on the call, which happened multiple times. But, that's part of the juggle. And I think, there's something about at this point where I started to realize, okay, so there's something new that I need. And what I needed was to be able to get some more help. And so, that's a really tough one as well, because the mum guilt sets in and but nobody can do it as well as I can sets in. And you tell yourself new stories about why help is just not.
That mum guilt, and being that this is about International Women's Day, the mum guilt is huge. That from the time that you're not spending for when you're there, but you're not there, and things like that. And I know you've got a really good handle on that, but even then, you teach this stuff day in, day out, but even then, it still tests your own boundaries and limitations and stories, like you said, the narratives that come through.
It tests my own mindset around it. And, I found myself rapidly burning out because I was juggling so many things. I was dealing with first trimester issues of pregnancy.
Yeah.
And, energy levels were just at an all-time low. And so that was a time when I decided, okay, we absolutely need to get help. But the form of help looked a little bit different depending on the stage we were at. So we got a nanny where we could get them in on weekends and they could do activities with Charlie while Sean and I could go out and have a bit of a break, And that's huge for us because just being out on a Saturday in the middle of the day was just like, how is this even possible? Normally we have a toddler and we're doing activities around her. And so that was really good to have that space back. And then being able to have evenings, being able to get a nanny at nighttime so Sean and I could go and have a dinner or just be able to relax. Just these little bits and pockets of time that we were able to carve out.
And I think this is really interesting, right? Because when everybody thinks about hiring and expanding their business, the first thing they think is, admin people, more employees to do the work. Whereas I remember the first time you kind of challenged me on that was, what if you got help outside of work and actually got the help at home? So when you get home, you can actually decompress and that sort of thing. So, this is really, important is that your first hire doesn't necessarily need to be in the business. It can be at home, and probably you would challenge the fact that it should be your first hire is that support at home. Now, you went and hired a nanny, but obviously people quite often will bring in the help of family. But I think this is, really important, is that you've got to get that help one way or another, right?
That's exactly right. And I think this is also what motivated me so much to keep the businesses going and to keep the revenue going, because it enabled me to then pump money into areas of help that I absolutely needed in that moment. Yeah. And so hiring a nanny, being able to put my daughter in daycare more days, and now she's in kinder, so she's, there 3-4 days a week, and just being able to have that alleviation of responsibility at home. So I focus on, growing my baby, but also it alleviated my husband, because he, as a caretaker, also can go through caretaking burnout, right? Yeah. So it allowed him to decompress as well. And it allows us to work better together, because as much as I default him as the primary parents burn out too. And they're humans as well. And they need decompression and they need time away and they need all of that too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all about being able to recognize what is the highest need in the moment. And now that I'm so close to actually delivering this baby, this sort of second hire, if you will, that we got was someone to be able to really service my clients. And so we've just hired a clinical coach. And all of these things, it's funny. It's kind of like when I hired my mentor all those years ago, am I in a position where this is easily affordable? The answer is always no. Like when you put on staff, you're never going to put on staff going, oh, I've got buckets of money ready here to go that can service this staff member indefinitely. That's never the situation. The situation almost always comes down to I can't afford not to hire this person, right? But also right now, it's a pinch to hire this person. But you've got to work out what that higher need is. And for me, that is the higher need to alleviate me, to get me more time and energy back, so then I can continue to grow the business. So it's a constant strategy game.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, because you're juggling so many different pieces of the puzzle. There's so many different balls that you're trying to keep floating in the air. And at some point, when you start to recognize certain things dropping or that certain things are threatening to drop, you've got to go, well, what do I need to do to actually keep those really important balls juggling and let go of the ones that I don't need to juggle anymore on my own, at least. And, there's all of these considerations. So yes, it's a big mind juggle.
Yeah. That's, that's been quite the journey, and we're pretty well out of time now, but like I'm absolutely in awe of women in general, but you are one of the special women in my life that help me and keep me on track. And I thought that I used to juggle some stuff and I would push myself to burnout limits, but your journey's just been amazing to watch from the client space and the friend space as well. And just, watch you experience some of the burnout stuff that I was experiencing in the early days, because there was a narrative, right? The story was, how would she know? She's a young, fit woman who's never been burnt out in her life. But, you certainly have helped many, many people, probably hundreds of people now, if not thousands, through, platforms like this, start to recover from burnout and those sorts of things. But in amongst all of that, experiencing your own burnout, going through the evolutions of business, I just think you're amazing. And I just want to take this opportunity to publicly thank you for your time, energy, effort, and all the things you've certainly done for me and my family, because that you literally gave them their father back. And, just being the awesome role model you are to women out there, and, your daughter, probably daughters, I think.
Yeah, we're having another girl.
They're just going to be, I think they're going to be, Charlie's already an amazing human. She's just so full of life. And yeah, thank you for being part of this episode. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you bring to the community at the end of the month for the event. So
amazing. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to that event as well. So watch out, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. As always, it's always an honor and a pleasure.
No, thank you very much, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye, Yuan.
Bye.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. Thank you for joining us here at the Tradie Business School podcast. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know when the next episode drops. And most importantly, share this with someone that you think could benefit from it. If you've got any questions or would like to connect with either myself or our special guest, please do not hesitate to contact us at hello@tradiebusinessschool.com, and we'll have a great chat and we'll take things from there. So have an amazing day. Look forward to speaking to you soon.